Alrighty tidy folks, as you can see we're back on the old intro because for the Arizona trip I have not yet devised one that I like. So today we are working on the steering system, the steering components for the 4Runner, and we join me in the shop in the middle of a thought probably. So let's just get into it. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that steering. We're going to pull the whole steering system down. Yeah. We're going to pull the whole steering system down and replace, I'm going to measure it. I've got my handy dandy measurator over there. We're going to measure it all out on the floor and take one thing off at a time and replace it. Make sure it's all still measured the same. The steering wheel's upside down, which I'm gonna have to fix. I don't know which way it's turned though. I don't know if it's clockwise or counterclockwise. That's a bit of an issue because clock spring, which is also cruise control. So, I have an idea for that. I'm gonna try it, we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we're gonna have to buy a new clock spring anyway. But the steering wheel is 180 degrees off, it's upside down, so we're gonna have to fix that. While I've got all the steering off anyway, so that'll be fun. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna center the wheels, which they're already centered. Job's a good one. So wheels are centered, and the steering wheel is exactly upside down, so that's a thing. I'm going to grab the little creeperoo. We're gonna crawl underneath and we're gonna take all the steering components off. Well, we're gonna take the steering components off from the body and the wheels. Easy peasy. I should be able to do that without even pulling the wheels off, actually. That's gonna be fun. All right, so what we've got here is we've got outer tie rods, tie rod sleeve. So tie rod sleeve, inner tie rod, pitman arm, which comes out of the gearbox there. Pitman arm comes off the gearbox, goes down to the center link. We also have steering damper. You can see he's leaking, he's bad. That is one of the things I didn't order, but he's easy to replace. So we'll order it and we'll put it on later. Then you have center link comes over, same thing on this side. Idler arm, which is just a piece that keeps the center link from moving. That's what makes it a parallelogram. I'm just going to remove cable. Tick nuts. I'm just going to remove this guy from both sides on the wheel. I'm going to remove the pitman arm main nut. That's going to be fun to get off because that is literally your steering. Like that's your steering. We are going to not mark that because that is perfectly straight. Sweet. Okay. I was going to mark it, but there's no need to mark it. Same thing. We'll take that guy off. We'll take it off. Idler arm there. There's a nut on the up here on top. So we take that off, and then we pull that bolt for the steering damper. And I might just leave this off tonight and we just order the damper and have it ordered and come in tomorrow midday, and then we just put it all back together and it's done. So I might just pull this off tonight and start swapping the parts, and then that'll be today. We'll put it back on tomorrow. We also have shocks all the way around we're going to replace. I'm not going to do that right now. That'll be the next job. We also have a CV axle in there. The boot's broken. We're going to be replacing that guy.
In the next video, obviously not this one, today's video is the steering components. It's going to be, we're replacing everything but the drag link and the tie rod sleeves, I guess. So inner and outer tie rods, both sides, idler arm, pitman arm, and the steering damper will all be replaced. And you can see the passenger side tie rod there. He was giving me a teensy-tiny bit of trouble. For whatever reason, he did not want to break loose. And if I were reusing these parts, obviously I would not be hitting the bolt of the joint. That's bad. That's a big no-no. Don't do that. But because we're replacing them, it doesn't matter. We just need to get the whole thing down. And it's a lot easier to replace these components if we just pull the whole assembly down in one go and stick it on the bench. I did spend a couple hours trying to make a tool to separate the pitman arm from the gearbox. The tool didn't work. It's mild steel, and I don't have any method of tempering the steel here in Arizona in the shop. So we just went down to Joe Riley's and grabbed a tie rod and pitman arm puller, because they already make such a thing, and you can rent one, and easy peasy, jobs are good. And you can see it took, in real life, it took all of 5 minutes to put that tool on there, tighten it down, smack it a couple of times, tighten it down, smack it a couple times, and Bob's your uncle, right? And I cannot tell you, so the reason this video has been so far, or so long, in coming out, getting edited, getting posted, is because I have tried my best to find the best bits of video for you guys so you can see what I was doing. This is one of the better bits where you can't see anything at all. And I will apologize for that. It's not really critical, I guess, the pulling it apart bits. But somehow I had the camera aim just completely wrong this entire time. I actually had 3 hours of footage of pulling this. It's not 3 hours of pulling this down. It was 3 total hours of footage where I pulled some nuts off, then I had to go to the bathroom, and then pulled some nuts off, and I was thirsty, and stuff like that. So you do a few things, then I need to stand up and my knee hurts a little bit, or I need to go grab this tool, or you stand up and you walk somewhere else to go do something else, and that's what it was. It took 3 hours because I didn't have everything right at my disposal. I forgot a tool, so I had to go grab it, or I had to go to the bathroom, so I had to go to that. Whatever. But we get the stuff on the bench. You can see we got, our pile of parts there. That most of this stuff he had already. I think I mentioned it in the last video where we didn't quite have all of the parts. We did not have the idler arm and the pitman arm and the steering damper, which you can see there is bad because it just you can move it far too easily by hand. And the whole front end of this thing was filled with stuff exactly like this. You see how small that cotter pin is? And it's not even bent. It's straight. The point of a cotter pin is to prevent the castle nut from twisting. And while it did take just a teeny little bit of effort to pull that cotter pin out, it still wasn't correct. The cotter pin should have been longer, and it should have been bent such that you could not just pull it out. And everything on the front end of this truck that I touched was exactly like that. Some of the nuts, when I pulled the cotter pins out, they weren't torqued correctly. They weren't even tight. There was one that I put the ratchet on, and I went to spin it, and it just spun. I didn't have to apply any force. I didn't have to. The weight of the ratchet was enough that the nut came loose all on its own. It was not tight. You see me here fruitlessly beating on things until I realize, oh, yeah, duh, I have a tie rod puller. So I went and grabbed, the correct tool for the job. And proceeded to use it instead of the hammer. And it's really funny, when we pulled this puller out of the box, or when I pulled the puller out of the box, right? The instructions clearly state, and the way that the tool is used, it is very clear that you need some sort of lubrication on the threads. When I looked at the threads on the bolt for the puller, I saw signs that it had been used previously, but no signs that there had ever been any lube on it. Which means people were renting this thing and using it non-lubricated. Which means they were damaging it. I can't tell you how many times we've had exactly that. Rented, pullers, right? Crank pulley pullers and steering wheel pullers and any of these pullers that use that style of mechanism where you grab onto a part with a clamp or a claw of some kind, and then you run a threaded piece, a bolt, down through the middle and press against the spindle, the hub, the central shaft to pull the thing off of the shaft. I can't tell you how many times we have gotten those as rentals when I was doing this for a living. And the threads were just completely screwed up. The tool, there was galling, and there was all kinds of damage to the threads on both sides, the bolt and the puller piece, the hub, I guess, because people simply could not be bothered to A, use their brains, and B, follow directions. Probably enough of me being negative Nancy and bitching. And honestly, I'm not really sure what else there is to talk about in this video. Over top of this video is narration, like I'm doing, simply because it's just, honestly, it's self-explanatory. Just the things that I'm doing in the video, you can see, it just takes time to unthread the tie rod from the sleeve. It takes time to pull all the nuts off of the components and remove them from the drag link, or remove them from the body, or remove them from the steering knuckle, or what have you, right? This is just really, that's what most of working on automobiles is it simply takes time to do things. Your arm has to accelerate, and the ratchet has to accelerate, and you have to break things loose, and that takes time, and you have to tighten them up, and that takes time, and everything is just, it's time, is all it is. One of the reasons I started this channel in the first place was just kind of to show people, it's not that difficult. You can see me here. I'm sitting there talking to the owner of the vehicle, and I'm taking apart and putting together these tie rod assemblies, and the book says to thread them in such that the threads extending from the ends of the sleeves are identical in length. And then to measure, if you've got an old one that you're taking off, to measure the original, obviously, center to center of the joint, and then to make the new one that length. Or if you have a new one, to make it some specified length. That was, I measured 36.6 centimeters, and the book said 36.5, or something like that. Or I measured 36.8, and the book said 38.2. It was something like that. It was something very, very close. So I I made them, you can see me there, measuring center to center, making them the right length. And it's funny, I didn't actually read the book, the page that told me that it was 38 centimeters total length from a fresh build, until after I got all the stuff put up there. But when I got it all put up there, I saw, I measured it and I was like, oh, yeah, okay. It's exactly where it's supposed to be. Haha, I did it right. It's always good, I guess, to have that validation. You can see me there. I cleaned the drag link because I want everything going up in here to be nice and clean and purdy. And I guess purdy doesn't matter because he takes it off-road constantly. So it's literally the next time he wants to go camping, it's going to get all nasty and muddy and gross anyway. But I believe in any job that is worth doing is worth overdoing, right? It's if you're going to do it, you might as well do it 110%. There's no point in half-assing it. There's no point in quarter-assing it. There's no point in doing less of a job than you really need to. And the steering damper was kind of weird. You can see I'm sitting there reading the instructions trying to figure out what the heck is going on here, because the steering damper replacement is built a little bit different from the OEM. So the replacement guy is a little bit longer at full extension than the OEM damper, and the OEM damper had a stud inbuilt to one end of it, where the replacement does not. And I understand why they did that. They did that because this steering damper can fit in this configuration to a multitude of different vehicles, and they offer a hardware kit that replaces the stud with one that you bolt onto the drag link. So it's more versatile as a single part. You don't have to sell 4 different parts for 4 different vehicles when you can sell one part for 4 different vehicles and just have a hardware kit that covers the one oddball, right? Something like that. So I understand why they did it. It's just it kind of, I don't know, threw me through a loop for a minute or two, just because it was not something I was expecting. We'll say I've seen it before. It's not entirely unusual for stuff like that to happen, where a replacement part is made such that it can fit multiple different vehicles because they're close enough, and all you have is a little bit of hardware kit. But I don't know. It's been a number of years since I've done this for a living, like professionally. I've just been doing it on the side for my friends, for my friends' family, for my family, etc., right? I've been doing it as a hobby. So getting back and doing this stuff kind of for a living again, sometimes you forget things, I guess. So, I had to relearn and refresh it. Oh, yeah, that's a thing that they do. Oh, okay, that's fine. Not a big deal. And you can see here, I'm not using a torque wrench on the nuts for the joints, because I looked in the book, and the book for most of these was 30 or 40 foot-pounds, which is not a whole lot. But it says, put it to this torque, and then spin until you can put the cotter pin in, which is just, you can do that with a ratchet. You tighten it until it's snug, you turn it 1/8 of a turn, maybe 1/4 of a turn, and then you line the castle nut grooves up with the hole drilled in the stud so that you can stick the cotter pin in there, and job's a good one. It's nothing really particular has to be specially torqued for things that come with castle nuts. It's torque it until it's secure without snapping the bolt to the stud to the nut or whatever, right? And then align the castle nut grooves to the stud so that you may insert the cotter pin correctly and bend it correctly and have everything, right where it needs to be. So the footage of me putting all this up going back through all of my footage was apparently the footage of the hood closed from the top. Don't ask me why I didn't move the freaking camera down to the floor so that I could show you guys, because that's what I was going to do. I was going to say, okay, well, pulling it down is not crazy important. Putting it back up, we need to show, you know, where these bolts are and where all this stuff goes and how we line it up, and then I proceeded to promptly not do that. But I still wanted to post a video showing kind of what it looked like when I got done. So that's what this is. I will absolutely not fault you guys if you want to hit the dislike button. I don't like it. If I don't like it, how can I fault you guys for not liking it? If you've made it this far anyway. And there is... So when I put this thing together, I put it on, and me being smart, I put the pitman arm on the drag link first, and then I was going to put it all up together, forgetting that I had completely removed everything before removing the pitman arm when I was disassembling it. I was like, well, I've already got these things on here. I don't want to have to do that. So I pulled the pitman arm back off the drag link, and you can see I just turned everything to one side so that I could get the pitman arm joint back into the drag link after I placed it onto the gearbox. Order of operations, people. It's if you're doing this stuff, follow your order of operations. If you undo it one way, when you're putting it back together, put it back that same way. And then the inner tie rod end that... So we got two inner tie rod ends. They were the same part number, but they were two different parts physically. They were built in two different batches or two different lots or two different factories even, and two different places built them. The one that ended up on the driver's side appeared to be slightly larger than the one that ended up on the passenger side. Now, I could have just pulled them off and swapped them, but that was work that didn't really need to be done if there's not an actual issue. So you see here, we stick the camera up underneath, and that inner tie rod is very, very close to the frame of the truck. So what I did is I put the camera up there, mostly so I could monitor it, but I figured I'd show it to you guys too, just in case. And I moved the wheel back and forth a bunch to see if, as we move the steering, does the tie rod contact the frame? Is there any binding? Does it lock up? You know, is there a problem with it? If there's no problem, there's no point in pulling it off, right? So you'll see here that I finished tightening up the outer tie rod ends onto the steering knuckle, just so that we could make sure all of the steering geometry was going to be sitting right where it needed to sit, so that when I performed this test, turning the wheel back and forth, we could verify whether or not the steering was going to bind or contact the frame in any way. I do think it's kind of strange that the parts were in boxes with identical part numbers, but they are not radically different necessarily, but they are different enough that it is visually noticeable. And if you watch that first bit right there, you'll see it kind of looks like it contacted the frame there. But when I turned the wheel all the way to one side after the test, and I checked, you can see a little bit of the dirt falling off there too in the video. When I check it after the test, that's all I see is a little bit of disturbance in the dirt. I don't actually see metal on metal. I don't see, like, I dug further down through the dirt and saw the metal of the frame after this test. So the tie rod is not physically contacting the steel of the frame. That being said, it still bugs me. But going back to the footage, it the original parts look really, really close to the frame on the driver's side also. So we're gonna run with it. We're gonna make sure in a couple hundred miles that nothing has changed, that there's still no binding, there's still no rubbing, there's still no physical contact. And assuming that it stays this way, where it just looks really close, but there actually is clearance there, we're just gonna leave it. No point in fixing something that isn't broken, right? But anyway, that's it for replacing the steering, as not good as the video was. Stay tuned for the control arms and the shocks and adjusting the rear brakes in the next video. Hopefully it will turn out a little bit better. And as always, don't forget to like it, subscribe it, crank it, and rip it. We'll see you in the next one.